A little boy darted into the road, barefoot and breathless, his voice cracking as he screamed, "Help! Please, someone!" Cars honked. Brakes screeched. But only one man stopped. He knelt down, cupped the boy's face, and whispered, "You look just like her." The boy blinked. "Like who?" The man's voice cracked. "My daughter. The one I lost." Before we dive in, drop a comment with where you're watching from, and don't forget to hit subscribe for more videos like this. Let's begin. No one noticed him before that moment. A man in his late 30s, rough beard, leather jacket faded with time, and eyes that had forgotten how to hope. His name? Matthew Cole, a former firefighter, a man broken by loss. That day, he wasn't planning to stop. He was just passing through Harmony Ridge, a sleepy Midwest town where people minded their own. His truck had only a quarter tank left, and his motel room key was still in his jacket pocket. He had no ties, no destination. But then he saw the boy. Small frame, torn hoodie, dirt-smudged cheeks, panic in his every movement. Matthew swerved to a stop. Others honked, swerved around, and kept going. But he jumped out. The boy flung himself at him. "She won't wake up." Matthew knelt. "Ooh, my sister. Please, she's in the woods. I think she's dying." Matthew's heart stuttered. He gripped the boy's shoulders. "Where?" The boy grabbed his hand and pulled. Matthew followed. They raced through underbrush, past the rusted fence of an old junkyard, and into a hollow filled with wild pines. About 20 yards in, he saw her. She was lying on her side, her little arms tucked in, lips cracked and pale. Maybe 7, maybe 8. Curly hair matted with pine needles. Matthew knelt, checked her pulse. Weak, but still there. He pulled off his jacket, wrapped her in it. "We need help. What's your name?" "Ethan," the boy whispered. "She's Rosie." Matthew pulled out his phone. No signal. He stared at the boy again. That face. The same dimples. The same freckles. "Are you adopted?" he asked without thinking. Ethan looked confused. "No. Mama said we look like her. Before she died." Matthew froze. Every cell in his body told him something was off. Something deep, buried, and strange. But he didn't ask more. He just lifted Rosie into his arms. "Come on. We're getting her help." And then, for the first time in years, Matthew felt something stir in his chest. Purpose. The walk back to the truck felt endless. Rosie was featherlight in Matthew's arms, her breathing shallow and fluttery like wind through paper. Ethan trudged beside him, wiping tears with his sleeve, not asking questions, just trusting. They reached the truck, and Matthew laid Rosie gently across the back seat, cushioning her head with his rolled-up hoodie. He turned to Ethan. "Buckle up. We're heading to County General." Ethan climbed in without a word. As they pulled out onto the road, Matthew kept glancing in the rearview mirror, not just at Rosie, but at Ethan's face. Because it wasn't just resemblance. It was identical, like a mirror image of a girl from his past. His daughter. But that couldn't be. His little girl, Emily, had died in a house fire 5 years ago. That fire had burned everything. His home, his marriage, his will to live. He lost her body in the flames. Or had he? Matthew clenched the steering wheel. No, that was grief talking. Guilt-twisting truth. Still, his heart raced. The hospital came into view, red brick under a soft Midwest sun. He swerved into the ER lot, ran with Rosie in his arms as nurses rushed out to meet him. "She's 8, he panted. Dehydrated. Weak pulse. Ethan trailed behind, breath hitching. The staff swept Rosie away into the emergency bay. Matthew turned to the boy. "Do you have a guardian?" Ethan shook his head slowly. "Just Rosie and me." Matthew crouched. "What do you mean?" "We ran away. From the last house." Matthew blinked. "Last house. We were in foster care. We kept getting moved." Ethan's voice cracked. "But Rosie got sick. They didn't care. So I took her." Matthew's gut twisted. "Do you know your mom's name?" Ethan nodded. Her real name was Emily Jane Cole. Matthew's breath caught. No, it couldn't be. That was his daughter's name. He stumbled back, hand on his chest. A nurse approached. "Sir, are you okay?" He nodded numbly. "Yeah, just give me a second." His knees nearly buckled. Emily Jane Cole. She was gone. Declared dead. The fire marshal had told him no one could have survived that blaze. The body was never found, but he'd accepted the story. He had to. Until now. He turned to Ethan. "Ethan, Where's your birth certificate? Any papers? Ethan shrugged. Social worker has everything. Matthew pulled out his phone again. Still no signal. Then he looked at the boy's eyes again. Same stormy gray. Same flicker of stubborn hope. His daughter's eyes. And suddenly, Matthew knew. This wasn't over. Matthew didn't sleep that night. He sat in the stiff vinyl chair of the hospital waiting room, watching the ER doors as if they'd burst open with answers. Ethan curled beside him, fast asleep under Matthew's jacket. The kid had cried himself into exhaustion after the doctor told them Rosie was stable, but severely dehydrated and malnourished. She'd likely pulled through only because Ethan had run for help when he did. And that alone haunted Matthew, because he almost didn't stop. At 4:02 a.m., the doors finally creaked open and a tired-looking nurse approached. She's awake. You can see her, but only one of you for now. Matthew glanced at Ethan, then back at the nurse. He's her brother. She smiled gently. Let's bring him in. He nudged Ethan awake. The boy stirred, blinking blearily before shooting up. Rosie, she's up. Let's go. They followed the nurse through a maze of halls, every footstep amplifying the pounding in Matthew's chest. When they entered the room, Rosie looked impossibly small beneath crisp white sheets, her face pale but glowing with recognition. Ethan, she croaked, voice a soft rasp. He ran to her, gripping her hand like it anchored his whole world. I got help. He came. He's right there. Rosie's gaze shifted to Matthew, and the moment their eyes met, something tore loose inside him. He saw Emily, not a resemblance, an echo. Her smile, her nose, her chin, and when she whispered, "Thank you, sir," it nearly crushed him. He stepped forward slowly. Rosie, how old are you, sweetheart? She blinked. Almost 8. Matthew nodded, though his throat was tight. Do you remember your mom? Rosie looked away. She was nice. She had a necklace with a heart. I used to play with it when I was scared. Matthew felt his knees weaken. Emily had that necklace. He gave it to her on her 5th birthday, the last one before the fire. He steadied himself. Where did you live before? Rosie looked to Ethan, unsure. Ethan bit his lip and said, I don't remember the name. It was far. Lots of yelling. But Mom sang sometimes. And she'd hold us real close when it thundered. Matthew inhaled, a tear sliding down without permission. He remembered those songs. He used to sing them with Emily, back when the world still made sense. Do you remember your last name? He asked. Rosie looked straight at him. Cole. That did it. He turned away, hand covering his mouth as emotions surged too fast, too thick. He left the room without a word. Outside, Matthew gripped the cold steel railing of the hospital entrance. Dawn was breaking, a dull gray slicing across the night sky. The kind of morning where everything feels unfinished. Unhealed. Matthew Cole, a voice said behind him. He turned. A woman in plain clothes, maybe mid-50s, held up a badge. Detective Lisa Harmon. Children's Protective Services called us when they realized you brought in 2 unregistered minors. Matthew stiffened. I didn't know they were in the system. One of them ran into the road, screaming for help. I just followed. She stepped closer. We believe you. I've seen the footage. You saved their lives. But, she opened a folder. These kids were placed in a foster home 2 towns over. Their social worker reported them missing 2 weeks ago. No solid leads since. Matthew narrowed his eyes. What about their birth certificates? She hesitated. They're sealed. But get this. Rosie's original name was Emily Jane Cole. Same name as your daughter, correct? His stomach dropped. That can't be coincidence. No, it's not. She glanced around, then leaned in. There's more. Their DNA matches yours. Matthew froze. Wait, what? The hospital did an emergency familial DNA match. It flagged both kids. Ethan's your biological son. Rosie is your daughter. The air whooshed from his lungs. He leaned back against the railing, gripping the cold edge until his knuckles blanched. They told me she died, he said quietly. They said there was nothing left to bury. Detective Harmon's voice softened. The fire report was flawed. Looks like your ex-wife escaped with both kids, but never contacted authorities. We think she faked their deaths to run. Matthew blinked. Why would she do that? Abuse allegations. Misunderstandings. Maybe fear. We're still digging. She died last year in a car accident. No ID. It took time to connect the dots. He couldn't breathe. All those nights, he'd hated himself for not saving Emily. She'd been alive. And not just that. He had a son, too. Where are they going now? He asked quietly. Detective Harmon sighed. They'll go back into the system, unless a family member steps forward. Matthew didn't hesitate. I'm stepping forward. Inside the hospital room, Ethan sat holding Rosie's hand. They both looked up as Matthew entered. He walked over and knelt down beside them. I need to tell you something, he said gently. I'm not just some guy who helped you. I'm your dad. The silence stretched. Rosie tilted her head. You knew her, Mommy. Matthew's voice cracked. I loved her more than anything. She was my world. And you too. You are my world now. Ethan looked at him hard, as if trying to read his soul. Are you going to leave too? Matthew shook his head. Never. Not again. And just like that, both children leaned into him, arms wrapping tight. It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet. But it was something stronger. A second chance. The drive back to his motel felt surreal. 2 days ago, Matthew Cole had no one. Just a backpack, a beat-up Ford, and the echoes of a fire that took everything from him. Now, he had 2 kids asleep in the back seat. His kids. Ethan had fallen asleep first, curled against the door with his jacket as a pillow. Rosie was quieter, watching trees blur past the window, blinking slowly, as if scared this moment wasn't real. Neither had asked where they were going. Neither had questioned if Matthew was telling the truth. It was as if their bones already knew him, as if they'd been waiting. He pulled into the gravel lot outside his tiny roadside motel. 1 room, 2 beds, enough to get by. He carried Rosie in, whispering softly to not wake her, while Ethan followed with her tiny cloth duffel. Nothing more than a few clothes and a plastic hairbrush inside. That's all they had. Matthew gently placed Rosie onto the bed and tucked the comforter around her. He turned, expecting Ethan to ask questions. Instead, the boy stood at the window, staring out. She always cried for you, Ethan said suddenly, voice barely above a whisper. Matthew turned. Rosie. Ethan nodded, still not looking at him. She said we had a dad with fireman hands. She said she missed how your arms felt. Like home. Matthew swallowed a lump at his throat. I didn't know you existed. If I had, I believe you. Ethan interrupted. Matthew blinked. I just wanted you to be real. For a moment, neither said anything. Then Ethan turned, eyes glistening. Can we stay here tonight? Matthew crossed the room and placed a hand on his shoulder. You're not going anywhere. Not anymore. The next morning came with a knock at the door. Detective Harmon. She looked weary but determined, a file folder clutched under one arm and a styrofoam coffee in the other. You might want to sit for this, she said, stepping inside. Matthew glanced at the kids, who were still asleep, then shut the door gently behind her. What is it? We finished digging through the sealed files. I think you need to see this. She handed him the folder. Inside were court documents. Names. Case numbers. Notes from social workers. He skimmed, then froze. There it was, in ink and bureaucracy. The story of how his ex-wife, Melissa, had fled the hospital after the fire, convinced that if she told anyone she'd survived, they'd take the kids from her. She believed the state would never trust her again. So she ran, changed names, hid. She kept them off-grid for years, Harmon said softly. Moved town to town. No one knew. When she died last year, the kids got lost in the system. No relatives on file. Your name was erased somewhere along the way. Matthew's hands trembled. How is that possible? I'm her father. Melissa never told anyone who you were. She changed their last names. No one knew to look. Matthew sat down heavily. So what now? Well, Harmon handed him another paper. This is the custody petition. You'll need to file this today. I've pulled every string I can. The judge is waiting downtown. You still want this? Matthew didn't even blink. More than anything. Later that afternoon, in a small courthouse that smelled like dust and old paper, Matthew stood before a judge with Rosie and Ethan seated beside him. The judge was a tall woman with silver hair pulled into a bun, reading over the documents slowly, thoughtfully. You're sure you're ready for this? She asked without lifting her eyes. Matthew looked down at the 2 kids, their legs swinging nervously, fingers twitching. He nodded. I was ready 5 years ago. I just didn't know I had the chance. The judge finally looked up. Children, she asked. Do you want to live with Mr. Cole? Rosie nodded quietly. Ethan looked up. He feels like home. And with that, The judge signed the papers. Custody granted. They didn't celebrate with cake or balloons. There wasn't enough time. Instead, they celebrated with something better. A visit to what used to be home. Matthew hadn't been back to that neighborhood since the fire. The house had long been rebuilt. New siding, new windows. A different family lived there now. But the tree in the front yard still had the initials he carved in it when Emily was born. EJC plus MC. He stood on the sidewalk, hand resting on Ethan's shoulder, Rosie beside him holding his hand. That tree, Rosie whispered. It feels familiar. Matthew smiled sadly. You used to nap under it. Ethan stepped closer to the curb. Is this where it happened? Matthew hesitated. Yeah. The boy didn't ask anything else. Neither did Rosie. They just stood there a long moment, letting memories soak into their bones, even ones they never remembered living. I don't want to forget her, Rosie whispered. You don't have to, Matthew said softly. You carry her. They turned back toward the truck. Back at the motel that night, Matthew started sketching plans on hotel notepaper, job applications, rental listings, nearby schools. He didn't know how, but he would build a home. Again, he owed them that. Ethan watched from across the room. Do we have to go back to another foster house? Matthew smiled. No, bud. This is your home now. Rosie spoke up, voice small. Do we still get to see you if you're busy working? Matthew set the pen down. You don't just get to see me. You'll be sick of seeing me. They both laughed. It was the first time he heard them laugh. And for the first time in years, Matthew Cole realized something. He hadn't just found his kids. He'd found his life again. The days that followed were a blur of paperwork, transition, and the quiet, difficult dance of becoming a father again. Matthew moved them into a modest rental home on the edge of Harmony Ridge. It wasn't much, just 2 small bedrooms, creaky floorboards, and a kitchen that hummed at night. But it was theirs. For the first time in years, he bought cereal in bulk, packed lunchboxes, learned how to braid Rosie's hair, and showed Ethan how to check oil levels in the truck. The kids had been through enough false starts. He wouldn't be another one. But healing wasn't simple, especially when ghosts lingered. One night, Matthew found Ethan in the garage, sitting alone on an overturned milk crate, eyes red and glassy. You okay, bud? Ethan didn't look up. It's my fault. The fire. If I hadn't dropped the lamp. Matthew's breath caught. He crouched beside him. You dropped the lamp? Ethan nodded, shame washing over his face. Mom told me not to run around, but I was pretending to fly. Like Iron Man. I knocked it over and it hit the curtains. I saw the flames. She grabbed us and ran. Matthew swallowed hard. Ethan, that was 5 years ago. You were what, 3? 4? Ethan whispered. Matthew shook his head gently. You were a child. You didn't start that fire. A house is just wood and wires. You didn't kill anyone. But you thought I did, Ethan said, finally meeting his eyes. Matthew's voice cracked. I thought I lost everything. But I never blamed anyone. I blamed the world. And myself. Ethan looked down. I still have dreams. Mom screaming. Smoke everywhere. Matthew placed a hand over Ethan's heart. That's why we're here now. We're going to build new memories. Brighter ones. Together. Ethan didn't say anything, but he leaned forward and hugged Matthew, so tight it nearly knocked him off the crate. Meanwhile, Rosie's healing was quieter. She smiled easily but flinched at sudden noises. She colored for hours. Drawings of a family that always had 3 figures. A man with big hands, a girl with curly hair, and a boy with a crooked smile. She didn't talk about Melissa much, but she kept that heart-shaped necklace always tucked beneath her shirt. Matthew recognized it instantly the first time she took it off. Did your mom give you this? He asked softly. She nodded. She told me it was the only thing that could never be taken from me. Matthew turned it over in his hands. The back still had the engraving. Love never burns out. His hands trembled as he clasped it back around her neck. She was right, he whispered, and neither will I. 2 weeks later, Matthew got a job at Ridgeville Engines, a small machine shop on the edge of town. Long hours, greasy work, but it paid well enough and kept food on the table. It was there he met Dave Marsh. Big guy, worn-out ball cap, owned a shop with his brother. Took one look at Matthew's hands and asked, You ever rebuild a V8 with a busted wrist and no light bulbs? Matthew grinned. I once did it with a kitchen flashlight and a baby monitor blaring in my ear. You're hired, Dave said. The job gave Matthew more than income. It gave him pride again. He showed up early, stayed late, came home with blackened fingers and sore knees, but always made time for bedtime stories. Every night, he'd tuck Ethan and Rosie in and say the same thing. No matter how tired I am, I'm never too tired for you. And every night, Rosie would whisper back, you feel like home. But peace has a strange way of inviting shadows. One cold Thursday, Matthew returned home to find a black SUV parked out front. A woman stepped out, sharp suit, clipboard, high heels far too clean for gravel. Mr. Cole, she asked. He narrowed his eyes. Yes. She extended a card. Karen Stiles, State Licensing Office. I'm here to perform an unscheduled welfare review. Matthew's stomach sank. Is something wrong? There's been an anonymous report, she said briskly. Concerns about the children's living conditions and your mental state. Matthew clenched his jaw. That's not true. I'll be the judge of that. The inspection was clinical. Karen moved through the house, snapping pictures, opening drawers, testing water temperature, checking the pantry. Rosie clung to Matthew's side the entire time. Ethan glared from the corner. Karen's tone never softened. You've only had custody for 2 weeks. That's barely enough time to gauge long-term suitability. We'll be reviewing your case in full. Matthew followed her to the door, voice tight. Someone trying to take them away. We're trying to ensure their safety. Do you know what I pulled them out of? She stopped. Do you know what trauma can look like, Mr. Cole? Matthew's voice dropped. Yeah, I see it every time Ethan flinches when someone yells. Every time Rosie cries in her sleep. But this house, this life, it's the safest thing they've had. Karen didn't respond. She slid into the SUV and drove off. Matthew stood on the porch for a long time after that, fists trembling. That night, he couldn't sleep. He sat in the living room, the silence louder than ever. The fear crept in. They could take them. Again. He reached for his phone and dialed. Lisa Harmon, the detective answered. Matthew exhaled. Someone reported me. I know. I intercepted the report. It came from a blocked number. Can you find out who? Already working on it, she replied. But I'll tell you this. It reeks of someone from the old system. Someone who knew the kids before you got custody. Matthew's voice dropped. If they take them, I won't survive it. Lisa's voice softened. You won't have to fight alone, Matthew. I'll stand with you. He hung up. Then he looked at the photo on the side table. Emily, her arms around a baby Ethan. Rosie still in the womb. That picture was the only thing Melissa left behind. And Matthew made a promise right then. I didn't save you from the fire, he whispered. But I'll save you now. Matthew woke the next morning before dawn, gripping his coffee mug like a lifeline, dark circles carved deep beneath his eyes. Across the kitchen table, Ethan stirred a bowl of cereal half-heartedly, while Rosie sat swinging her legs, humming softly to herself. Their innocence cut through him like a blade. They didn't know they might be ripped away again, and he didn't know how to tell them. But he wouldn't let it happen. Not this time. Before the sun had fully risen, he was at the county courthouse with every document he could gather. Custody order, employment verification, rent receipts, even photos of the kids' bedrooms. He handed the bundle to the clerk like it was his soul. I want to challenge the report, he said firmly. I need this escalated to a full review. I won't lose them. The woman looked up with a mixture of sympathy and weariness. You're not the first father to walk in here with fire in his eyes. I might be the first one with burn marks under the skin, he replied. Later that afternoon, he got a call. Detective Harmon. We found a source of the report, she said. It came from a former foster parent. Name's Carl Penner. Matthew's grip tightened on the phone. The one Ethan said used to yell. The same. Multiple past complaints, but no official action. Apparently, he was furious when the kids were removed after Melissa died. Tried to file for permanent custody and was denied. Seems like this is retaliation. Matthew stared out his window. Rosie was drawing chalk hearts on the sidewalk. I want to confront him. Lisa's voice was firm. No, let me handle it. No, Matthew said quietly. He hurt my kids, and now he's trying to take them again. The next day, Matthew drove to the rundown house 2 towns over. Slumped roof, cracked windows, the kind of place where hope went to die. Carl Penner opened the door in a tank top stained with grease. A cigarette stuck to his bottom lip. Can I help you? He sneered. You know who I am, Matthew said. Carl's eyes narrowed. Ah, the firefighter. Matthew stepped forward. You made a false report. Carl shrugged. Just told the truth. Systems full of guys like you. Show up late and think you're heroes. Matthew's voice was calm, but thunder roiled beneath it. Ethan flinches when people shout. Rosie doesn't like closed doors. You didn't care for them. You used them. You don't know what you're talking about. No. Then why are they terrified of going back? Carl scoffed. Because you filled their heads with fantasy. No, Matthew said. Because I remind them what real love looks like. Not fear. Not fists. Carl's face darkened. You think they're yours. They are mine. Matthew's next words came low and sharp. And if you come near them again, I will bury you in every court this state has. You'll never hurt another child as long as I breathe. Carl didn't respond. He didn't have to. Matthew had already turned and walked away. Back home, he found Rosie asleep in the hallway, curled up beside the family photo she'd been carrying around lately. Ethan was reading a worn-out comic book on the couch, eyes tracking every panel slowly, like it was taking every ounce of focus to stay calm. Matthew knelt in front of him. Hey. Ethan looked up. You okay? I am now. He handed him something. A small, sealed envelope. This came today. From the state. Final review decision. Ethan's eyes widened. What if they say no? Matthew paused, then tore the envelope open. Inside, one sheet. Review complete. Custody status. Reaffirmed. Further inquiries closed. Case sealed. Matthew exhaled sharply. We're good. You're staying right here. Ethan blinked, then broke into a grin that crumbled into tears. He threw his arms around Matthew, holding him like a lifeline. Matthew hugged back just as tight. You're safe, he whispered. Both of you. The next week brought calm like none of them had known. Rosie started first grade. Ethan joined Little League. Matthew kept working at the garage, even though Dave offered him a management position at a bigger shop in the city. Money's better, but I'd lose time with them, Matthew said. Dave nodded. You're the kind of dad that doesn't come around often. That evening, Ethan asked him, Do you think she'd be proud of us? Matthew looked up from the dinner table. Your mom. Ethan nodded. Matthew swallowed, then smiled. She'd be proud you still asked that question. And yeah, I think she's smiling somewhere. Rosie chimed in. She always said we'd find him. Matthew turned to her. Find who? You, she whispered. Then she reached for his hand. Matthew didn't speak. He didn't need to. For the first time in his life, silence felt whole. But one last ghost remained. He needed closure. One foggy Sunday morning, he took the kids back to the cemetery, Melissa's resting place. The headstone was small, plain, just her name, her dates, and a line that read, A mother's love never burns out. Rosie laid flowers. Ethan stood back. Matthew knelt. I'm sorry I didn't find you sooner, he said softly. I should have looked harder. But I promise you, I'll never stop protecting them now. Not ever. He placed his hand on the cold stone. Thank you for saving them that night. You gave up everything so they could live. The wind rustled through the trees. He looked up to find both kids holding each other's hands. And for the first time, it didn't feel like grief. It felt like peace. Fall came quickly that year. The kind that painted Harmony Ridge in amber and fire. Trees that once whispered loss now stood tall and blazing, like they, too, had survived something and decided to burn with color instead of sorrow. Matthew stood on the porch of their little rental house, a cup of black coffee in hand, watching Rosie and Ethan rake leaves and argue about who had the bigger pile. Rosie was winning. She always did. She was faster, smaller, sneakier. She also smiled more these days. So did Ethan. They didn't jump at loud noises anymore. They didn't check the windows at night. They didn't sleep with their shoes on, ready to run. They had unpacked, both literally and emotionally. And that, to Matthew, was the real victory. Inside the house, the walls had finally begun to reflect their lives. Framed school drawings, photos of pancakes and pillow fights, a calendar so filled with scribbles it was practically modern art. The space that once echoed with emptiness now hummed with warmth, chaos, and the rhythm of second chances. On the mantel sat the old photo, the only one Melissa had left behind. But beside it now were two new frames. One of Rosie and Ethan on the day their custody was finalized, and another of the three of them, standing in front of a rebuilt fire station, beaming. Because yes, Matthew had gone back. Not full-time, not into burning buildings again, but as a mentor for junior recruits, helping others carry what he had once crumbled under. The captain had called it redemption. Matthew just called it coming home. One Friday afternoon, Matthew picked the kids up from school and surprised them with something big. A house. Rosie squealed, staring out the truck window as they pulled into a quiet cul-de-sac lined with tidy lawns. Ethan's mouth dropped open. Is it ours? Matthew smiled. If you want it to be. The real estate agent handed him the keys on the spot. It wasn't massive, but it had a backyard, 3 bedrooms, and a kitchen that actually had enough counter space for Rosie to keep baking cookies without knocking over Ethan's science projects. They raced inside. No hesitation. No fear. Just joy. They picked their rooms. Rosie chose the one with the morning sun. Ethan picked the one that backed up to the woods. Matthew took the room in the middle, close enough to hear them both breathe at night. The house was still empty of furniture, but it was full of life already. Rosie ran to him and tugged his sleeve. Can we paint our walls? Any color you want. Ethan grinned. Even black. Matthew laughed. Even black. But maybe just one wall. That night, they slept in sleeping bags in the living room. No beds. No TV. Just the 3 of them, a portable lamp, and stories traded between bites of marshmallow cereal. At one point, Rosie asked, Dad, do you think the fire happened to bring us back to you? Matthew blinked, stunned by her wording. She didn't say bring you back to us. She said bring us back to you. He reached over, brushed a stray curl from her forehead. I don't think the fire brought us back. I think love did. Ethan leaned his head against Matthew's shoulder. Promise you'll never leave again. Matthew looked at both of them. I promise. Forever. Weeks passed, and life filled in the gaps. Matthew started speaking at support groups for fathers who had lost custody or fell hopeless. His story was painful, but it gave people something powerful. Proof that healing was possible. That love could be louder than grief. One day, after speaking at a community center, a man approached him, early 30s, eyes red, shirt wrinkled. You said you thought your daughter was dead for 5 years. Matthew nodded. I did. But she wasn't. No, she wasn't. The man swallowed hard. My son's in foster care. I gave up on getting him back. Thought it was too late. Matthew placed a hand on his shoulder. It's never too late if your love is still standing. And, just like that, another flame was lit. One chilly December evening, Matthew got a call. It was Detective Harmon. I have something for you, she said. She came by the house and handed him a small evidence bag. Inside was a scorched metal locket. Heart-shaped, charred but intact. I pulled this from a box in the basement archives, she said. From a fire. Somehow it never made it to the report. Thought you should have it. Matthew opened it. Inside was a photo. Melissa, holding baby Ethan, and Emily, little Rosie, sitting on her lap. His heart clenched. Rosie walked in and saw it. That's the necklace Mama wore before she gave me the other one. Matthew handed it to her gently. It belongs to you now. Rosie took it like it was made of glass. I'll never take it off, she whispered. Matthew wrapped his arms around her. You don't have to. And if it ever gets heavy, just give it to me. I'll carry it for a while. That winter, snow blanketed the town in quiet wonder. The fireplace crackled every night. Hot cocoa spilled on pajamas. Rosie wrote stories. Ethan built robot arms from scrap metal. Matthew made dinner with music on and laughter echoing off every wall. They had become a family. Not just in name, but in soul. Not because fate demanded it, but because love never stopped trying. Final scene. Spring again. 2 years later. Matthew stood in the crowd at Rosie's 3rd grade graduation, holding back tears as she walked the stage in a little white dress, her curls bouncing, her locket shining under the lights. When she reached the mic to give a short speech, she paused, looked at the crowd, then straight at him. My daddy found me when I was lost, she said. And even when I didn't know I needed him, he already loved me. The room fell silent, and then came the applause. But Matthew didn't hear it. He only saw her eyes, his daughter's eyes, alive, burning bright, and finally, at peace.